Aravosis here at the Aravosis Report. As always, YouTubers, let me know how this is working. Volume is as loud as I'm comfortable making it, because otherwise it gets too loud on TikTok. How we doing? Let me know if the sound is working and everything else, and then I will get TikTok rolling once we know that. So fill me in. Fill me in. Oh, started now, but I'm a couple seconds ahead of you guys. So we'll give it a second to watch you guys catch up. Beep-a-deep-a-deep. Live chat, here we go. All right. All right. La, la, la. I always have to wait a minute for you guys to... There it is. Okay. Hey, Jason, thank you. Okay, that's good. Okay, sounds good. Excellent. Well, I think things are finally back to normal again with me trying to set stuff up here with lots of little hair sticking up. Okay, let me get TikTok rolling. Go live. And then we are good. Hey, Anthony in Ireland. Jens in Sweden. All right, TikTok. Boom. Mirror your video. Excellent. And actually, we got good lighting on TikTok today, too. All right. Cool. Excellent. All right, welcome, everybody. How are we doing today? Just looking at both now. Hey, TikTokers. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. Hey, Ash. So how folks doing? Hey, Alan, thank you for the gift. Join my team. And cool. I don't know if cool, you just meant to give me a gift or a question. If that's just a gift, thank you. If you had a question or a comment, I'm happy to take it as well. But thank you for that. On YouTube, hey, Jean-Marquis. Hoya, or Haya, TBI. Anyway, so welcome, guys. You know how that works. This is the show where we talk about the latest news from Ukraine. I will go through the news, and then we'll take your guys' questions. I am good, Kate. Thank you. I had a little nap earlier, but it was way earlier, so at least I'm not, conked out. You know, I get comatose when I take naps too late in the day. Hey, Magical, thank you for that. And thank you, John S., as well, for the gifts. Yeah, we'll start in a second. I just like to kind of get warmed up with people arriving, say where you are and all of that. Hey, Elizabeth. Yeah, actually do that. We haven't done that in a while. Give a little shout out where you are. I think that's always kind of nice just to sort of, just a gift. Okay, thank you. Cool. Appreciate it. But always just kind of nice just to see where people are. I think it's kind of fun. Hey, Lise, thank you for that. London. Of course, Mr. Who, that's funny. Manchester. Latvia. Okay, Moo is winning the late night series, I think, in Latvia. Do we have anybody farther than Latvia? We'd have to have somebody in Asia. Well, or maybe Russia. I don't think we get Russia that often. Ireland. Thank you, Ray. Or Rhea, or Ray, depending how you pronounce your name. Evans. Dijon, France. Salut. Thank you, Moo. And thank you, Martin, for the gifts as well on TikTok. The cheese bread's good, but I think it's Super Hornet. It's funny. I made some cheese bread last night, and my only qualm is I was trying to be healthy, and I made it 25% whole wheat, and it killed the flavor. I mean, it's good, but it killed the. I am shocked to what degree adding whole wheat killed the cheese flavor. So it's good, but I've had it 100% white, which isn't as healthy, and the flavor is so much more pronounced on the cheese. So now I'm a little bit annoyed, frankly. Thank you, Mark. I literally had it before the show. I toasted some and went, "Arr, my cheese bread is weak." So yes, unfortunately, I now know I have to make really bad for you white bread, cheese bread when I make cheese bread so that it tastes better. Anyway. All right, guys, I think we will get rolling here. Welcome all. I am John Aravosis. This is the Aravosis Report. It's my nightly show I do talking about the latest news from Ukraine. We will be talking about a lot, including, I see somebody just mentioned, Carly just mentioned Secretary Blinken in Ukraine. We'll be talking about that. The U.S. Secretary of State is there. And we'll go through the latest news. And then after the show, typically what we do is I go through the news, and then the second half, I take your guys' questions, your comments, etc. My background is in foreign policies and also a lot of internet politics as well. Thank you, Al, and thank you, Lotus, for the gifts. So the idea here, thank you, Al, again, and Vicky, is to basically take my expertise, try to give you guys a sense of what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, typically people ask and go, but how's it actually going? So we'll talk about that too, how the war is actually going, and we'll go from there. So let me go rolling right now. I was going to say meowing. I saw Christopher say, I go meow, and I was going to say, let me get meowing. Thank you, Tarad and Kevin, for the gifts, and Aviation Bean. As always, I give my gift pitch. Thank you, Aviation, as well for the glasses. I do this for a living, guys. This is my full-time job. I am not retired, and I pay the bills with your gifts. So please do be generous with your gifts. Even consider maybe buying a monthly membership on TikTok or YouTube. You can become monthly members. The mods can tell you how. And you can even buy gift memberships for other people in the forum, a one month gift membership. And it gives them access to the emojis, the little badge by your name. But most importantly, it gives you access to our Saturday show. I do a show every Saturday for just the paid subscribers. So we can talk more about that later. All right. And thank you, Al, for the finger. Let's get rolling, guys. So today is day 810 of Vladimir Putin's special 3-day military operation. Thank you, Elizabeth, for the gift there. A weird story today, actually yesterday, from, I believe it was the Times of London, saying that the British Foreign Secretary, is it Foreign Secretary or Foreign Minister? Foreign Secretary David Cameron proposed kind of a weird, actually it's funny, I'm sorry, Liam is saying, he likes that I added not retired. I did because somebody, when I was making the pitch the other day of why I hit you guys up for gifts and things, said, aren't you retired? And I thought, oh God, people think I'm retired. Like I've got all this income coming from retirement. I am not retired. This is my job. So that is why I hit you guys up for gifts. And yes, that is why I mentioned it. Because literally somebody said it and I went, oh, retired. That's very funny. So anyway, Times of London has a really odd story today or yesterday saying that the British Foreign Secretary, the British Secretary of State, so to speak, top foreign policy official, met with Trump in April, which we knew. Okay, he met with Trump a month ago, and pitched Trump on a peace plan, allegedly. Now, the Brits are saying it's not true. Thank you, Jeremy, for the gift. Let me read you a little bit about this, okay? The Brits are saying it's not true. Their position on Ukraine hasn't changed. This also comes via Politico. Politico also looked into it and got the Brits saying that their position hasn't changed. But listen to this. Citing a senior source, the Sunday Times newspaper reported this weekend that Cameron had argued fresh aid for Ukraine would help Ukraine hold its front lines, which is true, and give Trump the best possible conditions to try and secure a deal between the warring sides if he becomes president. So now this part doesn't bother me. He was trying to say that, look, if you want to have a good deal, we need to shore Ukraine up because Ukraine's not doing well. And basically, the Russians will have no reason to stop fighting if it looks like Ukraine. They could just basically keep fighting and blow through Ukraine anyway. Why do they have to negotiate a settlement? So you got to give Ukraine weapons so they can hold the line and hold the line and get the Russians to want to negotiate. Right? Fair. That's not a bad point. Not a bad point. He went on allegedly. Thank you, Vaughn, for the gift. He went on allegedly and said, according to the paper's source, Cameron asked Trump, what are the best conditions in which you as president can make a deal in Ukraine in January? And he answers it himself. It's both sides holding their lines and paying a price for that. Now, I believe the concern with what he said there, thank you, Mustard, you could interpret this one way and say all he's saying, thank you, Mustard, new gifts, new auction items as well. I finally have some new ones. Now that I'm back, it's the cool stuff. So I do have new auction stuff I put up tonight. We'll talk about that later. I just think of you, Mustard, because you're like, Mr. You and Callum are the two people who like the same stuff I like for the auctions. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Bryce, as well for the gifts. So the what's the word I'm looking for? Generous interpretation of what the British Foreign Secretary said. Thank you, Tom. Is that the only way you're going to reach peace is if Ukraine and Russia are both defending themselves well, right? So that there's kind of a stalemate. Not if Ukraine is falling and without aid and the Russians are running through them. Because if the Russians run through them, there's no reason for the Russians to sue for peace. The Russians will just run through the Ukrainians, right? That's the generous interpretation. The less generous interpretation is that the British Foreign Secretary was proposing a stalemate in Ukraine, that actually we don't want Ukraine to win. We want a tie, because a tie would make both parties say, oh my God, this is just too hard. We're dying. Let's sue for peace. Listen to it again. And I think, honestly, if this quote is accurate, it's the second thing. Listen to this. What are the best conditions in which you as president can make a deal in January? It's both sides holding their lines and paying a price for that. In other words, both sides paying a price for holding their lines, both sides fighting a war of attrition where they're killing each other, and they're both paying a price in lives of their troops so that neither wants to keep going. It's hard to know, because also here's the problem too. Trump, he was talking to Trump, but did Trump understand him? Did Trump misunderstand him? By the way, the very fact that I'm explaining it with two possible explanations means it's still possible that the British Foreign Secretary didn't screw up. It's possible that he was not arguing for a stalemate. He was saying, right now where we are in Ukraine, we got two options. One is a stalemate, right? Not even that. Let me start this. We got two options. One, we don't fund Ukraine, we don't help Ukraine, and Ukraine loses. That's option one. Thank you, Marie. Option two is we help Ukraine, and at least we help them hold the line so that the Russians end up realizing this is a fool's errand trying to win, and the Russians sue for peace. But the option is either we help the Ukrainians hold the line and make the Russians say, hey, maybe this war isn't going so well, or we stop helping the Ukrainians, like Trump wants, by the way, right? And he didn't say like you want, Mr. President, but he insinuated it. And if the Ukrainians lose, then Russia's just going to continue the war because they know they can beat Ukraine anyway. So anyway, I am hoping that this is a situation where the British Foreign Secretary spoke basically ineloquently. We hope. Or some Americans misunderstood him. Again, we hope. Anyway, but that was kind of a big story today. So back to Eastern Ukraine. We were talking yesterday about the town of Vovchansk, which is in Eastern Ukraine, right around here, more or less. Kyiv, Ukraine's second largest city, is right here. I was telling you guys yesterday, it's about 20 miles to the Russian border, maybe 30 kilometers, max 18 miles. Vovchansk is a little town that is literally like right on the Russian border over here in northeastern Ukraine. And the Russians are making a big push for Vovchansk and also this region, but now they're making a push up here too. What's going on is, we know the Russians are occupying this, right? Crimea in the south, all of this area, more or less the area that my fingers are pointing to here, okay? They don't have everything they want here in eastern Ukraine, in a region called the Donbass. It's a region, it's actually two regions that collectively are called the Donbass for whatever historical reason. The Russians control it, but not all of it. They want to control all of it. That's their big priority right now, even though they're playing games over here, is to really secure all of this, because they're occupying it, they've declared it their own, but they want to control all of it, right? Thank you, Elizabeth. What we think the Russians are doing is, thank you, Pedro, they're attacking Kharkiv area. They're attacking, as we said, oh my God, I'm forgetting the name already. What is it again? Vovchansk up here. But they're also now starting to cause some trouble up here around Sumy. So the region up here, they're trying to force the Ukrainians to move troops. Thank you, Jimmy. To move troops from over here to defend up here and make the Ukrainians split their forces. The Russians have enough men that they can stir up trouble up here and not take away from their efforts here. The Ukrainians don't have enough men. So for the Ukrainians, it will detract from their efforts over here if they've got to fight up here. That's what the Russians are doing at this point. A little bit more here. Let me see. One good thing, I guess, thank you, JJ, and thank you for love and for the rose, is that yesterday, or Sunday, actually, 2 days ago, Ukraine's military intelligence chief, Budnov, who's very well respected, said that, let me find the exact quote, gave basically a very dire explanation of how things were going in the Northeast there. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Ellie. He's told the New York Times, that the situation in the region was on the edge and moved towards critical every hour. Now, again, 2 days later, he says the situation is not catastrophic and there are indicators pointing towards stabilization. And I think by stabilization, he means towards basically, both sides getting into, again, sort of not even attrition, but to basically both sides holding off against each other rather than the Ukrainian front collapsing. Either that's true. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you. Was that JJ as well, and Mary for the gifts, and Billy the Kid, and Jen. Either that's true, or Zelensky got pissed and said, you can't go tell the New York Times that the situation is catastrophic and we're collapsing. You're going to destroy morale at the front. You're destroying the morale everywhere. You need to correct that. So we don't really know. Thank you, Vicky, right? And Courtney. it could be either one. It could be that the situation is stabilizing, or it could be that Zelensky got kind of pissed off and said, dude, don't go public and say we're in dire straits, because it's gonna hurt the military effort. So hard to know. Thank you, JJ. A little bit more here. British Defense Secretary Shapps said today, this was interesting. I just thought it was interesting. He listed the UK's commitments to Ukraine and criticized the world for having taken its eye off the ball recently. He said, now, by the way, what's interesting with me with this is he's criticizing the US, and he's kind of criticizing Trump. He's talking about the Americans. When he says the world took its eye off the ball in Ukraine and it let the Russians do better, he's talking about the American Congress not funding Ukraine for 6 months because Donald Trump told them to kill Ukraine aid, and they did for 6 months. Listen to this. He says the amount of time it's taken to get the rest of the funding through, he means American funding, right there, it's obvious, has directly led to the position we see in Kharkiv today. So he's blaming Republicans in Congress for killing aid to Ukraine and setting up the Russians for causing all the trouble they are now in eastern Ukraine. And honestly, he's not the only one. I was talking about this earlier in the week. Other military experts have said that, in fact, it was the Republican, blockade, so to speak, on aid to Ukraine that set the Russians up nicely for the battle they're fighting right now. But having said that, Biden shares some of the blame too. There was also an analysis this week saying that basically, this I think was from Sky News, that the Ukrainians are fighting with their hands tied behind their backs because Biden won't let them use American weapons to fight Russia, to fight in Russia. Thank you, Lamb Chop. In other words, for example, the Russians are trying to take the territory around here of Kharkiv. Well, they're in Russia. This is all Russia. They're in Russia firing at Kharkiv. The Ukrainians cannot use American weapons to fire back into Russia at the troops that are attacking them. They can use Ukrainian weapons, but they can't use American weapons. So think about that, right? You're literally here in the border. What's the border? The border is just a piece of land. It's not like it's a fancy thing, right? You've got the Russians on one side of the border firing at you, and you're firing back, but you can't use American weapons to fire back. Because Biden said, and the Germans are saying the same thing, by the way. Biden and the Germans are both saying, don't use our weapons to fire inside Russia because it'll be escalation and Vladimir Putin will get angry. And we don't want Putin to get angry. So we're still playing that game. Bash Brannigan says, does the Russian public know how many Russians died? No. Well, a couple different things. One, the Russians try to control the internet, but they can't. It's not the Soviet Union. It's not North Korea. So my guess is any Russian that wants to go out and see estimates of troop losses can find them, right? The British talk about it. NATO's given figures. The most recent figure from the British was 450,000 casualties, Russian. But casualty, remember, in military terms means both injured and killed. Civilians, we think casualty means killed. It doesn't mean that in military terms. So 450,000 casualties means combined killed and injured, most of those injured, but the killed could be 100,000. It could be 200,000, right? I think conservatively people probably think 100,000 killed of the Russians in Ukraine. So my point here is, if you're an industrious Russian, you can go online and see that that's the NATO assessment. You are very welcome, Flower Power. That's the NATO assessment. If you're Russian, do you believe the NATO assessment, right? Maybe you're thinking, well, that's the other guys saying, who knows? Clearly, the Russian government is not going to give them actual casualty numbers. They're not going to be able to get it from anywhere else. The only thing that I would say the Russians know is once you have 450,000 casualties, and that number is pretty solid, it's a NATO number, you've got 450,000 men who have either been killed or injured seriously enough to go back home, losing a limb, whatever, right? If you're dead, people back home, if 100,000 men are dead, people back home know. People back home don't know how many other men are dead, but 100,000 men dead in a country of 153 million or so, which is Russia, that's going to have an impact, right? You're going to know somebody who knows somebody. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Snowblade. And thank you, Flower, for the gifts. You're going to know somebody who knows somebody that lost a son, right? The second thing is, if you've got, let's say, 350,000 injured, like seriously injured, you're going to have people on the streets of Russia missing limbs, missing arms, missing legs. That, I told you guys before, I forget, what was the U.S. casualty numbers for Iraq and Afghanistan we could say the last 20 years, but I'm wondering number of injured, not the number of dead, but the number of injured. Do we know? Because an interesting thing happened in Washington, D.C. about 10 years ago with Iraq and Afghanistan. We suddenly started seeing a lot of young, able men, clean cut, white guys, a lot of white guys too. They were, there's a lot of blacks and Latinos and others serving in the U.S. military. But in this case, they were white, they were clean cut, and they were missing limbs, missing arms, missing legs. And I mean, you'd see them a lot in the neighborhood. Okay, Mustard is saying 75,000 U.S. wounded total. Okay, and like I said, I noticed a marked uptick in the number of young men in Washington, D.C. you saw without limbs. And you knew they were, and I even talked to some of them, and they were fighting abroad. Asked them about their service, and they said, yeah, I was fighting over there. If I noticed that in a country, the U.S. population was probably 300 million at that point, okay? Twice Russia's. We only had 75,000 injured. Russia's got half our population and has got 350,000 injured versus our 75,000. You better believe they're noticing injured men without arms, men without legs. It's got to be having an impact. Sorry, I was asked the question on whether the Russians know by Bash Brannigan, to what degree, how many people have died. And my suspicion is they don't know how many have died, but they know they have died because they know somebody who knows somebody, and they've seen a lot of injured. So anyways, so they know something, but I think they also have the ability to kind of hide it. You know what I mean? Now, Mel is asking a question. When is the bridge getting hit? Interesting question. So we were talking with Vlad, my friend Vlad in Ukraine, who works with the military, works with a lot of civilian agencies as well, about this. And Vlad had to be careful. So I sort of answered it, and Vlad said, that's not a bad answer. But basically, what Mel is asking about is the Kerch Bridge down here. The Kerch Bridge connects Russian-occupied Crimea with Russia over here. You've also got Russia over here, but you've also got Russia over here. Putin built the bridge. It's like an 18-mile bridge or 12-mile, I think, bridge, like 18 kilometers, something like that, between Ukraine and Russia here to basically solidify his hold on Crimea and southern Ukraine, because he's occupying here as well, right? And this allows him to bring troops across, supplies, etc. The Ukrainians have attacked it a couple times, knocked it down, but not knocked it down enough that the Russians couldn't build it back up again. And the question is asked, 18 kilometers, that's what I was thinking. Thank you, user 336. And the question was, why haven't the Ukrainians knocked it down? Because it's not time. Basically, they're not stupid. No, I'm not saying this to be sarcastic, but I mean, A, we know they're not stupid. We know they'd love to take it down if they could. So why aren't they? Because A, they've got a finite number of weapons. So whatever weapons Ukraine uses, let's say it uses Storm Shadow cruise missiles, the British cruise missiles that have been very effective, but it's only got a limited number. If it uses, Callum said they might need 12 or 14 cruise missiles to take the bridge down. If they use those 12 to 14 cruise missiles, that's 12 to 14 fewer cruise missiles they've got to attack something else. Well, right now, it may make more sense to go after Russian military headquarters, to go after Russian fuel storage or some other kind of facilities, right, than to take down the bridge. You only have so many weapons, and we know Ukraine's in a situation where they don't have enough weapons, so they want to be sparing with the weapons and say, okay, in economics, it's called opportunity cost. Actually, in the military, it'd be called opportunity cost too, which means if I do this, I will not be able to do something else, because you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? As soon as you use the missiles, you no longer have the missiles. So what's the alternative I could be using them for instead of attacking the bridge? If there's a better alternative, I'll do that instead. So that's the first thing, is I think Ukraine determined, thank you, Annette, I will get to you next. I think Ukraine determined that there's a better alternative it can go after instead of the bridge, that'll give it more bang for the buck. Second thing is, if you're going to go after the bridge, you're probably going after the bridge. Oh, okay, per se, you're going after the bridge because you want to hurt Russia's defense of Crimea. Well, a couple things going on right now. Currently, we've heard that not a lot of supplies are going across the bridge. Russia's using the south. They're using a roadway down here and also probably a train that was just established along here as well. Remember, Russia's over here and over here. So the Russians can import stuff over here to the occupation, or they can come across the bridge. They can also come across the water, but they keep getting knocked out by Ukrainian boat drones and things like that. So if the Russians don't have a lot of traffic coming across the bridge, taking out the bridge isn't killing a lot of traffic, right? If the Russians don't have a lot of fuel and munition and artillery shells, right, all this kind of stuff coming across the bridge, then how does it help them to knock out the bridge? You want to knock out the bridge when the Russians are using it. So it probably means you've got to first kill the Russian logistics traffic along here, knocking out the highway, knocking out the railways, etc. Then the Russians turn and need to use the bridge, then you hit the bridge. Second point, or third point probably here. Thank you, Macabre. Right now, Ukraine isn't going after Crimea. Ukraine wants Crimea, but right now they're not in a position to threaten Crimea. They don't want to take out the bridge that supplies Crimea today because it doesn't help them. It doesn't help Ukraine. They want to take out Russia's lifeline to Crimea when they're in position to attack Crimea, right? So when they're ready to attack Crimea, they want to say, now we're going to take out the Russian supplies. Now we're going to take out the Russian resupply effort by taking out the bridge, by taking out this. If they do it today and they don't attack Crimea for a year, it doesn't benefit. In a year, the Russians may fix the bridge by then, and then they've got supplies to Crimea again. So that's the other reason. Again, it's opportunity cost, but it's also what's the actual goal of taking out the bridge? It's to assist an attack on Crimea, an invasion of Crimea that isn't happening anytime soon. So why take out the bridge now? Anyway, if you had an endless supply of weapons, they'd take out the bridge. But they don't have an endless supply, so they've got to basically ration what they've got. So there you go. Annette is saying, did you see that shirt that El Corte Inglés is selling in Spain? Yeah, El Corte Inglés is a big department store in Spain. Is selling in Spain and Portugal, Russian connections. A child's T-shirt with Ukrainian flag crossed out? You're kidding. Oh, my God. Did they take it down? I mean, after people complained or what? I'm curious what the... wow. That's obnoxious. Wow. That's incredibly obnoxious. Actually, because it's also kind of a death thing, really. I mean, Xing it out is kind of like genocide. I mean, that's really creepy. Wow, I did not see that. But do you know what the follow-on was? Like, it basically did enough controversy happen that they pulled it? I could see that happening here where, a shirt pops up and they take it. It was, okay, Martin says it was taken down. Good. Okay, I did not see that. Wow. I mean, I'm glad it was taken down at least. How worried do we need to be about Russia in the U.S.? Not really. It depends what you mean, Carly. You don't need to be worried about war with Russia, no. You should be worried about Russia in the sense that, well, okay, I'm going to say this very brutally. Most Americans don't need to give a damn about Russia in the U.S., right? Because it doesn't matter. Most of the world doesn't matter to you guys. And I've said this to people all the time, and I say this as somebody, I speak 5 languages, I've traveled around the world, I've lived around the world. I am very international and cosmopolitan for an American. So I am the first person to defend knowing about the world, all of this, right? But for most Americans, it just doesn't matter. If you work, back in the Midwest in a factory or whatever, you don't need to know what's going on in Singapore and Afghanistan and Iraq and even Israel. It doesn't matter. I mean, it may make you a better international citizen to know, but there's no reason for you to know. And I would say for most Americans, it doesn't matter what's going on with Russia because your day-to-day life, there's not going to be a nuclear war. If there's a nuclear war, then it matters, right? But otherwise, it's not going to matter. We're not going to go to war with Russia. If you care about the world, you should care about what's going on with Russia because there is the risk of an eventual war with the Russians in Europe if they win in Ukraine, because the Russians, unfortunately, are getting belligerent again. They're turning back into the Soviets again, I've argued. Basically, the Soviet Union, which those of us of a certain age know what that whole situation was like. A dictatorship that was basically run by the Russians for 70 years in Europe, took half of Europe hostage. It created misery for tens of millions, actually probably 100 million people, or more than 100 million people, or probably about 100 million people. And, you should care about that. Because also, if we end up going to war with the Russians someday in 10, 20 years, then that is going to affect you, right? So, but it's, nothing's happening right now, and I don't see us going to war with the Russians anytime soon, but I do see us in another Cold War. And in the same way, if you're of a certain age where you were alive during the Cold War, the same way that we were worried about war with the Soviet Union, you should be worried about war with Russia. Bottom line, And it doesn't mean that you should be scared of them. I'm not scared of them. But I certainly was worried about war with the Soviet Union. It did not make me want to appease the Soviets. It didn't make me want to bow down and give them everything they wanted. It made me actually want to stand up to them. But I worried about it. I think you should be just as worried about Russia today as we were about the Soviets back then. So that's the deal. Well, Fanos, the problem is no tax money on wars. What do you do once you're invaded? Turkey decides to invade and take half the Greek islands. Are you going to say no money on wars after the Turks invade and they take your island? Really? I mean, it's a nice concept to say no war, but I think people that say no war are kind of naive. I mean, if you say no tax money on wars, I just think it's naive, because if you're invaded, you're going to need money for a war. Nobody invaded the USA yet, but but I think that's a very immoral argument. I am not a big fan of watching somebody drown and saying, hey, it's not me drowning. Have a nice life, right? It's not me. I'm not drowning. You're drowning. I've always believed in helping people, and I do, and I mean it for international as well. Now, I'm not going to help you on the international scene. Thank you, Adventures. On the international scene, I'm not going to help you unless it's in my national interest, right? So, and I think this is the way all countries act and should act, frankly. You're welcome, Snowblade. They should act where, A, you try to do good in the world, but B, you should only get involved if it helps your own country. Because if it doesn't help your own country, what's the point? Again, remember we talked about Ukraine too, blowing up the bridge. There's opportunity cost, and there's also limited resources. If I try to get involved in this conflict, I may not be able to get involved in the next conflict. And if this conflict doesn't affect my national security, what if I then don't have weapons for the one that does affect my national security? In any case, so yeah, I'm not a big fan of people saying, well, the war isn't in America, so go to hell, rest of the world. If that was the case, you with a Greek name would be speaking German right now. Actually, you'd probably be speaking Italian, but you'd still be living under a German dictatorship if America didn't get involved in foreign wars because they weren't our wars. Because, as you are well familiar, the Americans finally got involved in World War II a little bit late, and they saved Greece, and they saved much of Europe. So, and then we saved Russia as well. So, I am a fan of getting involved. All right, let's go back to a few more stories here. So there was a very weird controversy today. I thought this was kind of strange. I suspect you guys are going to agree with me on this one. The U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, does a surprise visit to Kyiv today, to Ukraine. Meets with Zelensky, all this kind of stuff. And after meeting with Zelensky, he does, what appears to be impromptu, but it wasn't impromptu. They organized it. Blinken is a musician. I forget if he plays saxophone or what he plays. He's a musician. And he plays plays a song with a Ukrainian rock band. Blinken plays blues and rock and everything else. And he plays the song by Neil Young, Rockin' in the Free World. Is it guitar? Okay, thank you. People are saying guitar over on TikTok. So he plays guitar, and he plays Rockin' in the Free World by Neil Young. And a lot of folks, interestingly enough, journalists I follow online got very upset, and also some advocates for Ukraine that are not Ukrainian got upset because they thought it looked very frivolous. They were saying, Ukrainians are dying in eastern Ukraine, and you're playing rock music. And I looked at it and thought, this American Secretary of State is coming to Ukraine and then goes and sits down with a Ukrainian rock band. I'm sure they're probably a famous Ukrainian rock band, and plays what at least is perceived to be a patriotic song about being free. Now, the funny part is I saw people saying that in actuality, Rockin' in the Free World is not really a song about rockin' in the free world. It's actually a song about how the establishment government doesn't work well and this kind of stuff, right? Thank you, Crystals, for the TikTok gifts. But nonetheless, I don't think it's frivolous, especially because he was playing with a Ukrainian rock group, right? Yeah, it's exactly. Sword for Justice is saying morale booster. That's the way I took it. Now, had he, as Secretary of State, visited Ukraine and went out to a bar to play music and and got drunk or something, then it's disrespectful. But he sat down with a Ukrainian group and played a song with the Ukrainian group and played an American... Oh, that Neil Young is Canadian. That's actually very funny. Dawn says Neil Young... I was going to say an American song. Hey, we claim Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young for ourselves, but you know how it is, Dawn. We claim everything. But you know what I mean? Like, I just don't, I don't get the negativity of it. And but people were just beside themselves with anger about it, saying, Ukrainians are dying and he's doing this. And I was like, I think it was kind of neat. There was something I just thought it was kind of neat. Kevin says BBC made some comment about connecting with a younger audience. Yeah. I mean, I think it connects with a younger audience. I think it's just kind of human. Like, I liked the humanity of it personally. And again, he wasn't like, and now I'm going to play a rock song. He sat down with a Ukrainian band and played a patriotic, at least what is perceived to be a patriotic song. Again, doesn't bother me. I'm suspecting it probably doesn't bother you guys either, but I was very surprised as to how many journalists were like, oh, this is not going to go over well. Sword for Justice says, when the time comes, would Ukraine send agents to swim from boats in the Black Sea to plant bombs on the bridge to take it down? Inshallah, God willing, yeah. I mean, whether they can is another question, right? Right? Who knows? Callum had told us, Callum, I quote Callum a lot because Callum is our former British military guy who just left the British military recently, was there for over 10 years. He was a sapper, among other things, knows how to defuse bombs and set bombs. And Callum had said that basically, and a number of you had backed him up on this, if you're going to take out the Kerch Bridge in the south, you don't just want to blow up a couple spans of the bridge. In other words, you got a bridge. Bridge is two things, right? More or less two things. One, road on top. Okay, you got a road, right? The bridge is made up of road and pillars holding up the road, right? A bridge is stuff sticking out of the water and the road going across. Well, if you just blow up the road, it's very easy to replace the road. They literally just take a new concrete slab of, 20-foot slab of road and put it in place and the bridge is fixed. You don't want that. You want to take out the concrete support that's going into the ocean or going into the sea. Take that out and it's much harder to repair. So what Callum had talked about was that, yes, either you would use, cruise missiles, Storm Shadow cruise missiles, which are the British cruise missiles they've given to the Ukrainians. He also said he would love it if they used men on the ground who, Navy SEALs in essence, who would go, secretly, and divers and plant bombs literally in the infrastructure of you chop a hole in the bridge and you put the bomb inside, basically, in the support. So that would be the goal. The question is whether they can, whether they can, because they have to get to the bridge, hopefully extract the men so they don't die. And the second point, which is Matteo is saying, whether the bridge is even a priority at this point. They need troops and ammo to hold ground is what he's saying, right? And so basically, right, the concern right now is in eastern Ukraine and northeastern Ukraine. The concern right now isn't with the bridge. But nonetheless, if they were to take out the bridge, troops on the ground might be a good way to do it. Thank you, Maddie. Appreciate the gift. A little bit more here. This was kind of sobering, I thought. But again, worth telling you guys because I try not to be rah-rah guy here. I try to give you the truth. A new poll shows 50% of Ukrainians in Poland, Germany, and Czech Republic say they are less likely to return to Ukraine than before. The poll found that 66% of respondents said they were completely or rather satisfied with their lives in other countries, basically that they escaped because of the war. Not great for Ukraine because eventually you'd like people to come back either to fight or to rebuild the country, right? So, it's literally your economy that flees when people flee the country. This story came up yesterday. I wanted to mention it because somebody asked about it. I actually wasn't familiar with it, and I looked into it today. So, Nikolai Patrushev, who is a top Putin ally in the Kremlin, he is very conservative in the way Putin is, believes a lot of the same crazy stuff Putin does, and is considered very influential in Putin's thinking. So Putin's kind of worldview of the whole world is out to get us, the conspiratorial worldview Patrushev is responsible for, or at least has a big impact on. Well, Patrushev pretty much got demoted this week when Putin fired the defense minister. So Putin, or whatever you want to call it, he got rid of him, took the defense minister Shoigu, removed him from his job, put an economics guy, an economist in place, and then took Shoigu and made him, I think it's called the head of the National Security Council or something like that. But basically, it's this body in the Russian government that kind of oversees intelligence and other kind of things. In any case, it's considered a very influential job. It's the job that Patrushev had up until this week, when Shoigu, the defense minister, got the job instead. So Patrushev was moved into another position. It is considered a demotion, according to Sky News' international affairs editor. For Patrushev, he still will have some influence with Putin, but it's interesting that a hawk, basically, a hawk meaning somebody who's a little more kind of rabid, got diminished, which is kind of interesting. Again, who knows? Be nice if it's true, though, right? What else we got? Just looking here. Ukraine knocking off, hitting more trains in Russia and a fuel storage tank. 6 children have been rescued. 6 Ukrainian children that were kidnapped by the Russians. Thank you, Alisoni, have been rescued in Ukraine from the eastern provinces. The children range from ages 5 to 12. As you know, Putin was indicted. Arrest warrant was issued by the International Criminal Court, the court at The Hague, basically the court that tried the Germans after World War II, issued an arrest warrant for Putin because the Russians have been kidnapping Ukrainian children and taking them back to Russia and brainwashing them as trophies of war, and basically trying to brainwash them into thinking they're Russians. I mean, it's a crazy story. In any case, 6 of the children were recently rescued, so that's a good story. Thank you, Crystal. The little bit more here. This was a really gross story. So, but I want to mention it because this is one of those stories that kind of tells you about the Russians. Thank you, Crystal, again. Tells you about the Russians. Thank you, Ernie. And please do keep the gifts coming, guys. You're being very generous tonight, and I appreciate it. Remember, the gifts pay my bills, so I appreciate if you keep them coming. You help me keep doing the show, so thank you. Wall Street Journal reported on thank you, Mustard, a Russian prison cell, or prison that was kept in Vovchansk, which kind of to take us round circle here. Thank you, Mustard. Lots of gifts coming from Mustard. Appreciate that. Vovchansk, which is the town in eastern Ukraine, here near Kyiv, that they're worried that the Russians, they're evacuating it now, so it kind of looks like the Russians may be taking it pretty soon. Before Ukraine took it over, well, it's always been Ukrainian, but when the Russians invaded back in 2022, they captured Vovchansk. Thank you, Bob. And for 7 months, it was Russian occupied. Wall Street Journal did an investigation and basically found that the Russians were running it's really gross, a prison scam in this town where they were arresting people and holding them hostage for money. And I mean, it was literally not even the war effort. They would arrest these guys. They would accuse them of being active members of the Ukrainian military and beat them. I mean, beat these guys horrifically until they paid them $20,000 US. And when they got $20,000, they would let them go. It was an entire scam by the Russians to basically make money. Now, particularly gross with this, the Russians got their hand on a number of Sri Lankans, from Asia. And they were, I'm going to read you about this real quick here. The six Sri Lankan students and workers who said they were used by the Russians as slave labor to maintain the facility. This is from the Wall Street Journal. The 6 Sri Lankan men and 1 Sri Lankan woman who were imprisoned in a separate cell were living in the Kharkiv region of Kupiansk when the Russians invaded on February 24th. 4 of them arrived in December to study at the local medical college, and the 3 others were doing odd jobs. Russian troops entered, mind you, countries like Sri Lanka, people leave and try to find work in other countries and then send remittances back home to their family. So if you're from Sri Lanka, Ukraine, wasn't a bad place to work and make some money and send back home until they got invaded. 4 of them arrived in December to study at the local medical college, and 3 others were doing odd jobs. Russian troops entered the city in the first days of the war. The Sri Lankans say they tried to escape towards Kharkiv, the regional capital that has remained under Ukrainian control. At the very first Russian checkpoint outside Kupiansk, they were detained, blindfolded, and sent to Vovchansk, said one of the detainees. The Sri Lankans spoke no Russian or Ukrainian, and only a few of them spoke limited English. The one word they understood from their Russian captors was the word money. Okay, they took foreigners hostage Thanks, Tarad. Thank you, Charles. When they said they didn't have any money, they were tortured, the Sri Lankans said. The Sri Lankans were interviewed by the Wall Street Journal. Unable to buy their freedom, the Sri Lankans were kept in Vovchansk to clean toilets and interrogation rooms and to tidy up after the Russian soldiers' frequent drinking sessions, said the Sri Lankans. Often they were beaten, their heads slammed between the door and the door frame. At a press conference organized by the Ukrainian police, one former detainee, Jokin Tiran Tynes, 34 years old, took off his socks to show missing toenails that he said had been pulled by the Russians. The only woman in the group who spent the 6 months separated from the other Sri Lankans, Uttakamar Mary Edid Prima, 50 years old, sat looking down, rocking silently. After the trauma, she is frequently fainting, said the men. I bring this stuff up because this is who the Ukrainians are fighting. This is who we're fighting. This is the Soviet Union. These are the same people we had to deal with back then. It's the same people today. It's the same morality. It's the same ethics. It's the same way these people fight. We are not dealing with good people here in terms of the Russian government and the way they fight wars and the way they treat people. This is Abu Ghraib, the crap we did to the prisoners we had, except that they do it left and right when it comes to the Russians, and it's obviously wrong. In any case, all right, I'm going to call it quits with that. Let's go and do Q&A, questions and comments and everything else. It's a horrible story. I hate to sort of end on a horrible story, but at the same time, it tells you something about the Russians, and I think it's important because you also, the underlying message of this story, by the way, is the Russians are about to take this town back, which means they're going to start doing this again. All right. This is what happens when you live under Russian rule. You are not liberated. Thank you, PC Noel, for the rose, and no one for the rose. No one. That's cute, for the rose. That's okay, T-Reb. You won't be standing anywhere in about 2 seconds. Discord, not tonight, but we will. I promise we'll try to do Discord tomorrow. Oh, I've got new auction items up at Discord. Finally, now that I'm back in DC, I am back. We've got cool auction items up. I've got about 5 or 6 up. I will put more later. Thank you, Timothy. But I am back in DC. We've got really cool auctions we do to benefit Ukraine. Half the money gets sent that I make in the auctions, I send back to Ukraine via our friend Vlad, working with the military, working with private charities as well. The other half goes to support my work because I do this full time. Thank you, Timothy, for the gift. And we've got really cool stuff. First I will show you, I picked this up in Bali. I was in Indonesia last month, and it is a Bali fridge magnet, but I liked it because A, it's kind of fun and cool, but also it shows a traditional Balinese wedding couple. My nephew was getting married. This is literally the outfit he and his wife, now his wife, Reiko, who's from Singapore, were wearing in Bali, and I just thought it was really cute. Anybody who collects fridge magnets, just keep it in mind. It will be over at the auctions. A couple other things. I've got a cool Ukrainian bracelet, black leather bracelet with the Ukrainian trident and the Ukrainian flag. You guys can see there. These are always very popular because I think they're very cool. What's nice is it's kind of a masculine bracelet that women can wear too. I just think it's very cool. Couple more things. Oh, these are always very popular. This is actually one of the last ones I've got. This is a Ukrainian military patch. This is the most, I would say the second most popular Ukrainian military patch. The most popular is the Ukrainian flag, right? Yellow and blue. The second most are these showing the trident. These come in lots of different colors. I'm sure the colors mean something. I've never been able to figure it out. This one obviously is military camouflage in black, but these are very cool. It's new. It's not a used patch. Three more things to show you. I love this. I picked up 2 bars of soap in Singapore in the airport at the duty-free shop. They are coconut soap with orange and lavender essential oil. I just smelled them and they're beautiful. Again, if you're not into soap, you won't get this. I like nice soaps. It's absolutely beautiful. But I've got a description. I did a video showing all the ingredients and stuff, but it's this beautiful handcrafted soap from Singapore. Like I said, it absolutely smells wonderful. But I like this kind of stuff as sort of a hand soap to have in your bathroom, that kind of thing. I just tried to pick up stuff when I was traveling I thought somebody might be into. Final 2 things. These are good. Final 2 things. One, Ukrainian coffee mug. Vlad sent several of these. I've only got 2 left. Very cool coffee mug with a Vyshyvanka design and then the Ukrainian trident on it. Coffee or tea mug. The trident, you know, is a symbol of Ukraine. The Vyshyvanka, the design, is the design the Ukrainians put on the shirts. It's the traditional designs they wear for their clothing. Actually, Vyshyvanka Day is coming up in a week, I think, isn't it? Actually, thank you, Ginger, for the gift. It's coming up very soon. Anyway, auctioning off the coffee mug that Vlad got in Ukraine. And the final thing I have is the final challenge coin. It's in 2 days. I didn't even realize Vyshyvanka Day is in 2 days. I've got to remember that. The final thing is the final challenge coin. I got a bunch of these from Ukraine. This is the last one. It is the Ghost of Kyiv challenge coin. They're commemorative coins made to typically commemorate big military accomplishments. In this case, the Ghost of Kyiv is a possibly apocryphal, the Ukrainians will tell you he was a real person, fighter pilot. Actually, I did read a story about him. They think they know who he was, who shot down a lot of Russians, but then himself was finally shot down. It's really nice. This one got destroyed in the U.S. Postal Service. It literally shredded the mail. So it's got some scratches on it, but it's not bad. I mean, I did a video close up. You can even tell looking at it, it's not bad. But I'm just telling you because it's not perfect. If you were to see, I'll show you guys here. If you look at the video in the auction, you'll see what I mean, but it's not bad at all. This is the last one I've got. Very, very popular, this. And that's it. That's the final thing. So, well, they're up for auction, Josh. It's however much people want to bid. So people bid, and the highest bidder gets it after a week. When you go check out the auctions on Discord, you will see a public auction and a VIP auction. The public auctions are for everybody. Thank you, Jonathan. The VIP auctions are for the monthly subscribers everywhere but TikTok because TikTok is broken. And I apologize for this. The TikTok connection to Discord is broken. It's been broken for 2 years now that I know, that I've been trying, and they just don't fix it. I don't know why they don't fix it. It's kind of a bummer because I wish they would fix it, but they don't. So there's no way to make the connection between your TikTok account and the VIP auctions. But if you subscribe on YouTube, Ko-fi, Discord, any of the other services, you will be able to access the VIP auction. So I apologize. I'm sorry. But anyway, yes, I've actually got more stuff going up too. We've got a really cool kind of map of Ukraine. Another very neat, what do you call it? We were talking about these, the woven artistry from like the 1950s and 1960s. And then finally, I will show you. I don't know if the coin is on the public auction, Red. I don't recall. Maybe if somebody wants to check right now, you can see. I don't have access to my iPad or my phone because I'm using them for the broadcast right now. The final thing we picked up was this pin. And it's a very pretty pin. I think, Dawn, I don't remember if you were the one who told us about these or not, but it's a very pretty pin made with Ukrainian hearts. I believe this was for a fundraiser. They were not cheap, so the starting bid will probably be $30, I think. They were actually more than that, but I'm going to start the bidding at $30. But they're very pretty, and it shows the Ukrainian colors with the heart there. But just kind of a little, it's a pin. You know, so you can see the relative. It looks like a Star Trek communicator upside down. Oh, it was you. Oh, you got it. Yeah, it ended up being very pretty. So this is Dawn saw them online. Vlad ordered them and then sent them in a care package. So I'm sorry, it's from Ukraine. I should have said that, but Vlad ordered them and then sent them here. What do I do for a living? Andriocha, this is what I do for a living. My background, thank you, Chef. I don't want to go through the whole thing right now because you can actually to find the auctions and to find my background, you can go, if you're on TikTok, the auctions will end in a week. I've got them going for 7 days, so they'll end next Tuesday. To check out the auctions or to read up on my background, on TikTok, you can go to my profile, look for the Linktree link, which is the URL on my profile, click it, and you'll see Discord as one of those options. Click it and go to the auction. For you guys, go to aravosis.com at the bottom of the screen. That will take you to my list of links. So aravosis.com or on TikTok, just go to the bio, click the link. You'll see Discord. That's where the auctions are on the left-hand side. You will also see my LinkedIn, and you can read all about my background. But basically, my background is U.S. politics for the last 35, 40 years with a hefty dose of international relations thrown in. a lot more than that. I'm a lawyer. I have a master's in international relations, basically in law from a law degree, a JD, and a master's in international affairs from Georgetown. Speak a number of languages, have worked in a number of countries, and have really most of it spent in Washington, D.C. over the last 3 decades plus doing political work here. But I've always done it with much longer story. I've done a lot of work with the internet. Back when the internet was new, like in 1995, I was one of the first people in the world, I would argue, that said the internet could be really influential for politics and organizing people internationally and in your country, and did that. So I've always worked with the internet and politics. And when the war broke out, decided maybe I could use my expertise in politics and journalism and the internet and educate people about what's going on in Ukraine. So that's the very, maybe not short answer, but decently short answer to your question of what do I do? I do have to pay auction on yes, I have to pay income tax on the half of the auction proceeds. Oh no, the stuff that goes to Ukraine is a deduction. Yeah, the stuff that goes to Ukraine is a deduction, thank God. But the other half I've got to pay. Yeah, the part I keep is income. Yep. I am an expert in international politics. Having a master's in international relations from Georgetown and speaking 5 languages and having lived around the world and visit 30 countries kind of puts you in that position. But why don't you, actually, mods, before you ban the person, tell us how many languages you speak and where your master's and graduate degrees from. Everyone, let's just wait and see. This person is going to tell us where their graduate degrees in foreign policy are from and how many languages they speak. I'm going to go with 2 languages at best. Because first of all, they're probably not American. They probably speak some Asian language or African language. Probably working for a Russian troll farm. Yeah, that's what I thought. They're foreigners. He's got an accent too. Okay, mods, have some fun. See, by the way, the guy couldn't even tell me how many languages he speaks. He says, "You are funny." Couldn't even tell me how many languages you speak. I still have an AOL account. I do not still have an AOL account. No, I do not. We all did at one point. Anyway. If the same troll was here, you can always, Ash, feel free to block that. Yeah, block him. That's fine. Yeah, since that person was here yesterday. Anyway, fluent in BS, exactly. Thoughts on the TikTok ban? TikTok, I'm trying to think of how to say this nicely. The very fact that I'm not sure how to answer this tells you everything you need to know about TikTok. I'm not sure how to answer this question without getting into trouble with TikTok. And that's why TikTok's in trouble, because people worry about what they say on TikTok if they're American, and they support things like Ukraine or democracy or criticize Donald Trump, and then TikTok bans them for a week to censor them. So that's why TikTok is in trouble with the U.S. Congress, because TikTok has a history of censoring free speech. They did it to Ukrainian broadcasters left and right when the war started, including doing it to me. They did it to me at the beginning of the war. They banned me out. They blocked my account entirely at the beginning of the war. They blocked my lives entirely. They revoked my live privileges. And then they did it to me about a month ago. About a month, 2 months ago. They didn't like me. I was talking about Donald Trump, and I was talking something. I was actually reading an article from Le Monde. I was literally translating an article from the French publication, and Le Monde is not only like the top most respected publication in France, it is one of the most respected publications in the world. And I was translating an article in Le Monde with the French president talking about Russia and Ukraine, and TikTok literally banned me in the middle of the article translation. So that is why TikTok is in trouble with the U.S. Congress, because TikTok has a problem with free speech. And I don't know what's going on, but they've got a problem with it, and it came around to bite them in the butt. So see what happens. But no other service does this. I've been on YouTube for a year. I've been on YouTube since 2008, I think. No, TikTok, Twitter since 2008. Never had a problem. Never censored, not censored once on Twitter. YouTube, I've probably been on YouTube since 2006, 2005. Never once have I been censored on YouTube. TikTok, all the fucking time. So that's why TikTok's in trouble. So, oh well. I mean, again, don't want to bite the hand that feeds me, but at this point, I'm pretty convinced that TikTok is a losing venture anyway, as far as, trying to make a living, frankly. I mean, they're important. They've got influence, but it's sad. It's very sad. Facebook I've never had problems on Facebook, though. No, look, I'm here, right? I mean, I like the community we built up. Happy to keep working on it with you guys. But TikTok, the complaints about TikTok, and the other problem with TikTok is they are owned by the Chinese. Kara Fisher, who's very good, respected, I would say I would consider her the most respected tech journalist in America, Kara Swisher. She's very good, very smart, very no BS kind of woman. And Swisher was asked once, something to the effect of, I saw her interviewed, 6 months ago about the TikTok ban, and asked, do you think TikTok is spying on us on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party? And she said, I was asked this recently, and I said, do I think TikTok, Kara Swisher, do I think TikTok is spying on us on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party? She said, no. She goes, but do I think TikTok would spy on us at the request of the Chinese Communist Party? Absolutely. And she said, and that's the problem. So, I mean, I'm paraphrasing her, but that's the basic problem, and it's not just spying. Part of the concern becomes right now, pro-Trump stuff on TikTok is 2 times the level of pro-Biden stuff. Now, that could just be that a lot of Trumpers are using TikTok. Who knows, right? Or is it TikTok's algorithms? Is it TikTok's computer program that promotes Trump stuff because they want to help Trump and they want to hurt Biden? Who the hell knows? But you worry about people getting so much of their news from social media, people being able to tweak Twitter. Same thing, right? Elon Musk is able to tweak the Twitter algorithm, the Twitter formula, and put news in front of you to influence the American election a week or 2 or 3 before the election, right? The Chinese could do the same thing. So, again, I'm agnostic on whether the U.S. Congress should be passing laws telling companies to divest themselves and stuff, but I do think there's a legitimate concern when you are owned by the Chinese and when you have a history of censorship, which TikTok does. Arbitrary and capricious censorship, which they do. But to me, Sasha, stop. All right. Yeah, Elon's pretty terrible. All right, guys, I think I'm going to call it quits. Let me do a quick summary here of the news stories, and then we'll call it quits for today, and then we will continue again tomorrow. All right, I will do a quick summary of the stories we covered today. Hang on here. Today's day 810 of Vladimir Putin's special 3-day military operation in Ukraine. Thank you, Crystals. Politico reports that Britain insisted its position is not changed on a peace deal with Ukraine. There was reporting out of London that the British Foreign Secretary appears to have said that he wants a tie in Ukraine and doesn't really want Ukraine to win. The Brits are saying that's not true. Hard to know what actually happened. Evacuations are underway in the eastern Ukrainian town of Vovchansk, where the Russians are in danger of taking over. British Defense Secretary Grant Shapps said that basically the U.S. is to blame for a lot of the problems Ukraine is having right now in eastern Ukraine, with the Russians now taking a number of Ukrainian towns because the U.S. took its eye off the ball and cut off aid to Ukraine for 6 months, which we did at the demand of MAGA Republicans and Donald Trump. Secretary Blinken is in Kyiv today. We talked about that for a while. U.S. Secretary of State. A new poll showing a large number of Ukrainians living abroad are now thinking of perhaps not returning to Ukraine. We then talked about Putin demoting Nikolai Patrushev, who is a sort of right-wing hardliner, appears to have demoted him, which is interesting. Actually, I didn't mention this story because I'd taken enough time, but I'll mention it briefly. Russia's Supreme Court has rejected an appeal by Kremlin critic Vladimir Kara-Murza, who is a British-Russian dual national, against his 25-year jail sentence for treason. He was jailed for being a critic of Putin and got 25 years in jail for treason. Number of freight trains were derailed by the Ukrainians, and a fuel storage tank was hit by Ukrainian drones. Ukrainians rescued 6 children who had been kidnapped by Russian troops as part of Russia's ongoing effort to kidnap Ukrainian children and brainwash them into becoming Russians. They literally give them away to Russian families, and Putin has been indicted by the International Criminal Court for this. And then finally, we talked about the Wall Street Journal article about a number of Sri Lankans being used as slave labor by Russian troops who held them hostage and demanded $20,000, or they would use them as slaves. The Sri Lankans didn't have a dime, so they used them as slaves. Lovely people that they are. All right, guys, I'm going to call it quits. Thank you for your gifts. Do check out the auctions because now they're back. I promise I will get the auction items mailed out this week. The auctions from the beginning of April and the auctions from 2 weeks ago. Just too hard to do them when I was gone. Even putting up the new ones was just confusing as hell. So now that I'm back, much easier. I will get those sent out this week. But as I said, I've got a number of really cool auctions. The auctions are pretty cool this week. So please do check them out. And remember, you're helping me out with the auctions. You're helping Ukraine out. So win-win. They're over on Discord. You can find Discord at aravosis.com, or you guys find it via the link in my profile. And voila! That is it for the show tonight. Thank you, Luis. Thank you, User336. Have a good night, everybody. Ashley and Manda and Callum and all the mods. Thank you guys for helping. Oh, I'm forgetting. See, now that I'm naming names, I'm already forgetting. I'm forgetting. I'm forgetting the other mods. See, I'm being bad. I shouldn't have named. I saw Ashley write a comment, and I said her name, and then thought I'm in trouble now. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Ginger. All right, guys. So have a good night. Thank you for the gifts, and thank you for joining us as always. I will be back tomorrow night at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, U.S. I know, 6 o'clock, not 7. I'm like having a brain fart. 6 o'clock Eastern Time, U.S. I will be back tomorrow. Look for me then. All right. Thank you, guys. All right. Have a good night. And bop.